Walter White versus Gus Fring, who could be said to be more evil? These two are the most prominent individuals in the Breaking Bad universe, two crime lords who had the biggest impact in the series. Both of them are guilty of heinous crimes, leaving a trail of destruction in the wake of their empire. And it would be far beyond the scope of this video to list them all. For Walter, perhaps his most chilling act was the poisoning of Brock, a completely innocent bystander, and one at such a tender age. While Brock survived, there was a higher chance than not that he might have died. For Gus, I'd suggest that his most chilling act was the elimination of Victor, a longtime associate who has proven to be nothing but loyal. Now, both these acts arose from different situations. For Walt, his poisoning of Brock was to manipulate Jesse away from Gus, with the ultimate aim of preserving his own life. For Gus, his killing of Victor is speculative, but it's likely for the fact that Victor could be linked to the death of Gale given his appearance at the scene of the crime, and hence his elimination of Victor was an attempt to avoid suspicion. With that in mind, I'd propose that Walter's act of poisoning Brock was worse than that of Gus's act of killing Victor, someone who knew the risks of this line of work, although it's reasonable to say that Gus is also capable of similar depravity, as seen by how he threatened Walter with the life of his family, especially his newborn child. But fortunately for Gus, what was threatened was never materialized. While Gus may have verbally threatened the life of a child, that is not as egregious as Walter's act of actually doing the deed. So in terms of their worst crimes, Walter has the edge here over Gus. And then we look at their motivations. For Walter, this started off in a sympathetic light, in a desire to ensure the continued welfare of his family after his passing. So it was supposedly rooted in affection, which is no doubt an honorable trait. But eventually his motivation degenerated to reveal its true form, in Walter's innate desire to build his empire. So the true intention was pride, which turned Walter into the villain of his own story. As he tells Skyler at the end, he did it for himself. As for Gus, his motivation is far more apparent and straightforward, mainly that of revenge against the cartel. Now, of course, you could say that Gus was also doing everything for himself, as the notion of having his vengeance satisfied is indeed self-serving. But in a certain sense, you could also say that Gus was also doing it for Max in some measure, to avenge his death at the hands of Hector. Love and hate are opposites, and sometimes the measure you hate something is in direct proportion to the love you have for something else. So the hatred that Gus bears against the cartel is simply a reflection of the love he has for Max. Of course, revenge is not a noble motivator, but it would still seem that the motivation of Gus is somewhat less selfish than that of Walter's. And then there's the level of self-deception in Walter's motives. It took him up to the last season of Breaking Bad for him to come to the terms of his true motivation. To paraphrase writer Vince Gilligan, Walt is a man who lies to everyone, but what makes him a standout liar is that he lies to himself. So perhaps in this regard, you could say that Walter is less evil than Gus, as he has to lie to himself to suppress his conscience. His new persona is so abhorrent that even he can't bear to face it himself, and that somewhere deep down he is still holding out hope that he isn't all that wicked. Gus, on the other hand, demonstrates complete self-awareness of what he is doing, and simply brushes it off with the phrase, "I am what I am." However, the final aspect of their motives that seals the deal for me would be their level of opportunity to walk away from their current lifestyle. Walter had several chances to walk away, most notably when he was already filthy rich, or when Gretchen and Elliot offered to take care of his financial needs. Now obviously you could also say the same thing about Gus, that he could also pack it up and abandon his quest for revenge. That is true, but I think in comparison, Walter had the greater opportunity to walk away from his criminal lifestyle, one of which was handed to him on a silver platter, but rejected due to his excessive ego. And let's not forget that Walter had a stronger level of emotional support than Gus did. Walter had his family, his wife, and Walter Jr., and even a newborn child. If he would not quit for himself, surely he should have quit for the sake of his family when he was already financially stable. The fact that he kept on the criminal life, in spite of the risk it poses to his family, attests further to his adamantly selfish ambition. Gus, on the other hand, was a loner who had no one to offer him such level of emotional support, and perhaps this contributed to his stubbornness in persisting in his evil. So to bring it to a close, in comparison with Gus, We have Walter committing the more heinous crime of poisoning Brock, his more self-centered motivation, and him squandering away his greater opportunity to walk away from his empire. In light of all that, I think we can say that he was the more evil one of the two.